A pleasant good morning, everyone. On behalf of the Director General, Ministry of the Public Service, the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Innovation, Science and Smart Technology, and the Director of the Learning and Development Directorate team, I welcome you all to this webinar entitled Cybersecurity, Threats, Concerns, and Solutions. This webinar is being brought to you today by the Learning and Development Directorate in partnership with the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Smart Technology. I am Jeanette King, Human Resource Officer at the Learning and Development Directorate and your moderator for this session. Working in the background as our producer is Mr. Michael Clark, Human Resource Officer at the Learning and Development Directorate, assisted also by Mr. Sherwin Ellis, Senior Human Resource Officer at the Learning and Development Directorate. Our presenter this morning is Mr. Andre Walk of the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Smart Technology. Over the past year, we have had to embrace and accept the inevitable of virtual communication throughout every facet of our lives, far sooner than we had anticipated, propelled by our current situation in this COVID climate. Some of us were barely using the internet as a means of simply searching for information or shopping or watching movies. Now our whole lives depend on communicating and sharing sensitive information through cyberspace. Many of us who are not too IT savvy are more vulnerable to what's out there that can threaten the security of our information and that of our employers. Often now, we may hear terms such as spoofing, phishing, whaling, malware, ransomware. What do these terms mean to the IT novice like myself? This webinar today is intended to explain, educate, clarify, and reinforce how we can operate as safely as possible in cyberspace. But before we begin, here are some protocols for us to optimize our participation in this webinar. We would like you to mute your microphone and turn your camera off. Pause or minimize distractions as much as possible. Most of all, please do participate fully in the webinar. At various stages during the presentation, you can make your notes and place your questions, comments, or queries in the chat box, and they will be shared with and addressed by our presenter during our questions and answers segment at the end of the presentation. Those questions that have not been answered during this session will be recorded and the responses will be emailed to you within a week of this presentation. Please note that this session is being recorded and the recording will be made available to you on the Learning and Development Directorate's YouTube channel. At the end of the webinar, a link to the Learning and Development Directorate participation feedback form will be placed in the chat. You are encouraged to complete the form and submit it forthwith. Your feedback is very important to us. It assists us at the Learning and Development Directorate to enhance our productions that we deliver to you. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to begin. And allow me to introduce our presenter, Mr. Andre Walk. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, I seem to have encountered a little problem here. My computer seems to be doing a little bit of something on its own. It has stopped sharing, so let me fix that quickly for you. So there we go. My apologies. So let me now introduce to you our presenter, Mr. Andre Walk. Andre Walk is currently employed with the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Smart Technology and has responsibility for overseeing the government's Wide Area Network, or GWAN. Andre comes with much experience in information communication technology, having been involved in this area for over 25 years. So ladies and gentlemen, you are in very capable hands. A warm welcome, Andre. And over to you.
I'm making sure everybody's hearing me. Hopefully everybody's hearing me now. I said, thank you, Jeanette. Thank you, participants, for joining this webinar. Good morning to everyone who has come onto this webinar to have an experience in understanding some of the do's and don'ts and ups and downs of cybersecurity. Let me go ahead and share my screen with you so that we can start our, I think, Jeanette, you may need to release your screen so I can go ahead and share my screen. In the meantime, thank you. In the meantime, let me just say to you that this webinar is intended to be somewhat interactive. That said, I want people to be able to take notes as much as possible and to grab some of the salient points. I'm going to try to keep a lot of the technical jargon down to a minimum. And what we intend to do in this webinar is to actually get enough information over to you that that information makes sense and it can be used to enrich your experience while you are doing your work, or whether it's working from home or whether you're working in the office. But we want to make the cybersecurity of government a little more robust. And that is one of the intents of this set webinar. So let me, you should be seeing my screen. Let me start with the objectives of the webinar. There are three main objectives. One is to develop an understanding of cybersecurity. And what we want to do here is help you to understand what cybersecurity means. It's a fancy term. You probably hear it, used quite a lot around the office and other places. We want you to understand what that really means. We also intend to give you enough information to identify some of the various types of cybercrimes that government faces today and incidents that result in those cybercrimes. And finally, we want to give you some strategies, some simple solutions that help you and help you to help government be a little safer in the areas of cybersecurity. So with that, we're going to pop into our next slide and get right into it. Let me do a little bit of a quick introduction of myself, which I should have done a little earlier. So let me take a second to do that. My experience is varied, as Jeanette said. It's over 25 years in ICT. I have worked outside of Barbados for probably half of my adult life, and then on returning to Barbados in 2007-8, I joined what was then the data processing department, and I've been there from then till now. So we're probably talking the last 12, 14 years. Some of the things I've worked on are the government email system, which many of you may know today as the gov.bb that you were using to send mail back and forth. And that was a system that was envisaged back in 2009. And it was actually quite small when we implemented it relative to its size today. The second thing that I worked on that's a major project is the government wide area network. And that encompasses a number of things that you may experience in your daily work life, the 535 and 536 numbers. That's part of the WAN, the wireless access that has been delivered to the various ministries, departments, and agencies, as well as data access. And then that all ties up and kind of encapsulates things like delivery of services like Easy Pay and the same mail service and those types of services that you may enjoy today. So the government WAN is now considered our major mechanism, our major vehicle for delivering those services to you. And those are some of the projects that we've worked on, the major projects that I would have worked on since returning to Barbados and becoming involved in our own ICT space. So let's jump into this whole thing about cybercrime. And let me start by looking at a number of things. We're going to look at the surface web, the deep web, and the dark web. We're not going to spend a lot of time on it, but just so you understand what they are and what they do. The surface web is considered the web that we all use. This is about 4% of the internet. If you're looking at this iceberg analogy, where you just see the top of the iceberg, but there's so much more underneath it that you don't see. The surface web then becomes the The popular services that you use, the Bings, the Wikipedias, the Googles, the online shopping, even things like EasyPay, those are considered surface web. Those are the ones that are most popular. The second aspect of the web becomes the deep web. And the deep web involves things like academic research, medical records, legal documents, scientific reports, subscription information. Social media has been considered deep web, but I would like to probably move that a little more to surface web, although it does have some elements of deep web involved in it. There's also financial records, government resources, computer sites, and those tend to represent the deep web because they are percentage-wise a lot more. They probably make up for about 40–45% more of the web than the surface web does. Finally, there's a dark web. The dark web consists of a lot of nefarious activity. It is not all nefarious. Please don't see it as that just because the name says dark web, but it is an area where a lot of things happen that most people may not be comfortable involving themselves with. So for example, things like drug trafficking sites, places where political unrest is sometimes dreamt up and given root and some form of air can happen on the dark web. Private communication can happen on the dark web, but one of the major things that you have to do to be able to get on the dark web is to use something called a Tor browser. And I'm not going to necessarily go too deeply into that other than to say the dark web is a place where governments tend to monitor a lot of activity of citizens, either their own or other citizens, because it is a place where a lot of activity that happens that is anti something's government and very nefarious can be given root. So let me use that to segue into what cybercrime is. And I'll say to you that cybercrime are categorized in three main ways. They're crimes against governments, and they involve cyber terrorism, cyber espionage, information warfare. They are crimes against property, and these involve intellectual property theft and cyber vandalism. And finally, they're crimes against persons. And those are the ones that are probably a little more important to you, the participant. Those things involve credit card fraud, identity theft, human trafficking, and child pornography. Now, one of the things that you have to be aware of cybercrime is a very umbrella term. That means it's a term that is used to encompass a whole lot of activities that are considered illegal. And cybercrime has been on the rise, as the FBI has indicated, in the last 5 or so years. In some cases, over 300% per year. With the recent coronavirus outbreak and the restrictions that have been placed on many people, we have had to turn to the internet to do a number of things that we often did in person before. And that meant that there's significantly larger numbers of people were going onto the internet to perform actions that they normally would have performed in person. That opens up many more people to potential cybercrime and to risk. So, why is cybercrime so important? And what is the significance of cybercrime and its importance? You would see in the slide, I'm hoping that you can actually see the entire slide. I'm not certain if you're able to grab this slide. Cybercrime is really important because what it does is it puts a lot of us, normal users of the internet, at risk. Could you just... Sorry, I was just having a distraction. I was saying, it puts a number of us at risk. And in doing so, it means that when we go online and when we start to do things like put our personal information online, it is a distinct possibility that that information can be stolen, or we can find ourselves in a position where we are significantly at risk for these actions. I am going to have to pause this for a second so I can take a call. I believe something's happened on the presentation that I am unaware of. Please bear with me.
Andre? You seem to be muted.
Okay, are you hearing me now?
Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you. Welcome again, participants. That little disturbance was interesting. Let me use that as a segue to say, with the current environment that we're in and the pervasive use of technology that we have almost found ourselves having forced on us, there are a number of things that are happening, especially in our local environment. And I'll give a little bit of an example of that. We were at a point where we had quite good internet access in Barbados, and we were quite proud of it, and we were happy with all the steps that we had taken. However, now that we've got to probably have at least 80 to 90% of our population online, which includes school kids who are taking online school, kind of stuff, we are finding that the chinks in the armor are starting to show. That means that sometimes some of you will be working from home and you will find it difficult to be able to access your files in the office from home, even on the VPN. The VPN is unstable, some things you can't get on. And all that, I'm saying, results in us having to take a very significantly hard look at our cybersecurity posture and also at our infrastructure, because it means that if these things continue to manifest themselves, we've got some problems that we need to fix before we start going into the wider world and start to offer our citizens the services that we talk about offering our citizens. I just want to plug that in there only because there is a significant challenge now that everybody has to be online in making sure that everybody's there and everybody's safe. Okay, so let me pop back into the cybercrime environment. Now, let me say to our participants, our public service is very, very vulnerable to cybercrime. That's not to say our public service is bad. That's to say that our public service would not have had a whole lot of experience at this, and we would need to train our public service a little more in some of the things that are important and are critical in terms of cybercrimes. It is important because we're talking about digitally transforming Barbados very soon, and in doing so, we're looking at a number of services that digital transformation will encompass. So digital licenses, passports potentially, new ID cards, services on the ID cards that will allow the ID card to act more as just more than an ID card. So for example, an ID card that's a bank card and has a few other features, possibly even your license. That is very critical, and it means that we've got to be able to put the security apparatus down and have it working so that when these services come online, our citizens are safe and they can trust the services that are being offered. Now, let me pop into some threats and some of the common threats that you may see occurring against yourselves, either at home when you're working from home, or threats that will be occurring at your workplace. And one of those threats is a malware threat. Now, while malware is not necessarily on the rise in recent times, can a little bit of background noise here. Okay, thank you. So back to what we were saying about malware threats. Well, malware threats are not very popular, and we're not seeing a significant rise in malware threats, certainly not from the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Smart Technology angle. Malware is still out there and is still a bit of a nuisance. Now, malware is an umbrella term that is used to describe any sort of malicious software written specifically to enact harm to a whole system. A whole system is your computer or the computer in the office. Malware can include things like viruses and worms, and they actually are little programs that get on your computer, infect the computer, and make it do things that you don't necessarily want it to do. However, the reason that malware is not on the rise is because malware does not easily translate into money. And what that means is our new environment where people attack our computers from their computer halfway around the world. Their interest is in making sure that they can get money as a result of that. And they will go into that whole concept a little later. But There's absolutely no value in stopping your computer from working these days. Your computer needs to be working for them to be able to get access to it, for them to be able to steal your information, for them to be able to cause you some form of harm, excitement, anxiety, and say to you, well, if you pay some money, we will give you back that information. And malware and viruses do not necessarily work well as the ideal conduit to be able to provide them with the avenue to get at your information and perform those types of actions. But it does not mean that malware and viruses are not still out there and you still need to be mindful of them. Ransomware, however, is very, very popular. And that is one of the threats that is on the rise today. The ransomware is a type of malicious software that's designed to block access to a computer system until some sum of money or some ransom is paid. I want to go into a live example of this, if I may. Well, I'm not able to share all the information related to it. I'll share some of the information that I can share related to it. In recent times, an organization within our government, a very critical organization, has been receiving calls from a threat actor who is in another part of the world, who's actually in Pakistan. That threat actor is attempting to get money from the government by saying to the government, I have some information on you, and if you pay me for this information, I will give it to you and you will use this information to fix the problems that you have. Well, it's not a direct ransomware attack. It does have some elements of that ransom in it, where I have something about you that is critical, something that's sensitive, something that you don't want anybody else to know, something that would be either damaging or embarrassing to you. And I will give you that information if you pay me a certain sum of money. Normally speaking, ransomware does not come in that human-driven form. It is more automated. And what will happen is you may come to your computer one day and realize that on turning it on and logging in, you have no access to your information. There may be a message that pops up on your screen that says, please pay the owner of this site 10 Bitcoin, 2 Bitcoin, whatever the currency is, to get back your information. What has happened in that case is the attacker has gotten into your network or to your computer. They have taken all of the information on your computer and they've encrypted that information. What that means is they've applied some form of a mathematical formula to it that makes it all unintelligible. It almost just looks like garbage to you. So you can no longer use, read, or access it. And they're saying, I have the key, I have the way to give it back to you, but you've got to pay me. That is what ransomware generally does. And it is significantly on the rise because we, especially in government and in Barbados, do not necessarily have all of the best security practices around preventing it from happening. And we will come into those practices a little later, and we will see what we can do to reduce the threat of ransomware. Trojans, on the other hand, are generally programs that are hidden inside other programs or disguised in other programs, much like the Trojan horse or the wooden horse of Troy. And once they get on your computer, they do something different to what they said they would have done. So for example, sometimes you go on a site and it says, click here to receive, let's say to receive a gift certificate. You expect to receive a gift certificate on clicking on it, but you may find that on clicking on it, within a few minutes, a lot of your information seems to be getting shared. How do you know this? You start receiving email for offers for things that you may have wanted at some point in time, or may have been interested in, but you never really put that information out there. You never sent it anywhere. However, that program has gone onto your computer and is starting to mine the information in your computer and is sending it back to a point where it's now being used to generate offers to you. It may not be as fast as that, but by clicking on it, usually you invite some form of a program onto your computer that starts to gather information about you, the user, and send that information to a site or another user somewhere on the internet who then sells the information for some form of money, and your information is now out there on the public web. There are bots and denial of services that also pose threats to government and personal computers. However, these are not as popular as the ransomware and the Trojans. The bots, however, are a little more interesting to know a bit about because I will say that a lot of us are actually part of bot networks without realizing it. So there are some programs that do things that are called massively parallel computational services. There was one at one point in time called the Great Internet Mersenne Prime Search. It was a little program you could put on your computer, you could put it on your government's computer if you wanted to. And what it did is it took some free CPU cycles and it dedicated them to computing certain solutions to these big mathematical problems. And if you were actually the person whose computer got that particular solution out, you would get some form of a prize or some form of a monetary inducement for doing so. It looked very, 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 very benign. It didn't appear to be in any way a threat. However, the challenge with that is it does two things. One, it steals some CPU time and resources, which may not be a big deal, but it also gives some insight into a computer that is not necessarily on an open network. So the government's network being a private and somewhat protected network, the people who write that program can see certain things about government's network that they may not necessarily need to see. In recent times, what we have seen at MISS is the use and the actual increase in people doing things called crypto mining. And what that is the inclusion into certain onto certain sites where you actually do these mathematical calculations for little pieces of Bitcoin or little pieces of these digital currencies that now exist across the web. However, it may not appear to be a threat to you. As I said, it gives a backdoor into your computer, especially if the people who write that software are not necessarily always above board or they have other nefarious actions in mind in the background. That can subvert the security of not only your computer, but the entire government network if it got out of hand. So it's something that while we see it and we discourage people from doing it, we're keeping a very close eye on it because I think there are a lot of users who are not aware of the dangers involved in it. Social engineering. And I'm going to tie this social engineering example right back to the example I was given before of the person with the malware and how their behavior was somewhat similar to that of a human-driven malware attack. What they were actually doing was a form of social engineering. And I'll go a little deeper into what the individual was doing. So the individual's ultimate attempt was to be able to speak to the Prime Minister, as we would have discovered from interviewing the individual ourselves. What they did is they called the Prime Minister's office and they started to speak to various people, and they would make very copious notes of who they spoke to, the day they spoke to the individual, and try to get a sense of that individual's role in the organization. So how close they were to the Prime Minister, how much access they had, and how easy it would be for them to be able to provide the attacker with the information on how to get to the Prime Minister. That individual called no less than 150 times over the course of about 3 to 4 weeks. And as I said, they were calling from Pakistan. They called both the Prime Minister's office, and then somebody gave them some information related to our office, and they started to call our office, and they started to work their way through our office, trying to find out who in our office was the person with the most influence that would have been able to get them, let's say, an audience with the Prime Minister. Well, after interviewing the individual, we did some research into the company that the individual was supposed to have been representing. We spoke to colleagues in the cybersecurity space in other countries about this company. And what we were able to determine is that the individual is not as legitimate as they claim to be. However, one of the challenges that we had coming out of that was how that individual was able to move through the government service at certain levels and connect to various people almost to the point where they got access to their target, which would have been the Prime Minister. And their sole intent was to be able to sell this report that they claimed to have generated. And I think the cost of it was 10 or 15,000 US dollars that they were trying to get. However, what makes it so interesting is that, well, we try to be helpful to people who call naturally and they're looking for information or they're trying to get hold of specific people. We've got to start to learn how to filter people's requests such that we don't provide them with more information than they actually should have on persons who they may actually be targeting and not necessarily care to speak to in a manner that is, not nefarious. So that social engineering attempt is one that now we are trying to decode, deconstruct, and put together a number of do's and don'ts that will go out there on the web to help people understand what you can and can't, what you should and shouldn't be able to say to people who call, who ask for certain types of information, either about you, your department heads, your ministers, PSs, because it's not always the case that these people are being kind or honest or nice, and they're not necessarily always Barbadians either. So we've got to be aware that the world has changed significantly, and there are a lot of people there who are looking to do damage or harm to the government. That attack in itself was considered not only a social engineering attack, but it was considered a phishing attack. And phishing is spelled in this case P-I-S-H-I-N-G. And it's considered a fraudulent attempt to obtain sensitive information such as usernames, passwords, in some cases credit card information, or other distinguishing information by pretending to be something or somebody that you are not. And as I was saying, that attacker pretended to be somebody who had information that was valid to the security of government and the security of government's information systems, and they wanted to share that information, but they wanted to share it with the Prime Minister. They were not interested in sharing it with anybody else but the Prime Minister, which is interesting because somehow or another they got it in their mind that the Prime Minister was the person who was going to make that decision related to, I guess, one, paying them, and two, taking the information that they claimed to have generated and would read it to implement it or what have you. We have never seen the information. We have asked for a copy of the information. We were never granted that copy of the information. We were given some little snippets of information that really didn't make a whole lot of sense because it was stuff that we would have already have known about, and it was not necessarily a threat. However, the person persisted. We are still under an active investigation, so unfortunately, I can't say a whole lot more to you about that situation, other than to say, when you answer the phone at your office tomorrow, Monday, Tuesday, it may not necessarily be somebody who is trying to get the information they say that they're trying to get for the reasons that they say they're trying to get it. Spear phishing, on the other hand, is another form of phishing, but it is directed towards a specific individual. In this case, if we had allowed that attack to continue, it would have been a spear phishing attack against the Prime Minister. And no doubt the person would have probably provided the Prime Minister with certain types of information that may have even subverted the security of the Prime Minister's own email or her information systems, places where she stores certain types of sensitive information. What we know this to is because we did ask the individual for some information at a point in our discussions with them, and the person showed us that they could send any one of us within government an email from our own selves. And that was in a way to suggest us that they had access to our email system. However, we knew that trick long ago and we knew exactly what they were doing. However, to the untrained eye, that would have made, I guess, just about anyone scared that email is coming to you from you, and this person has access to your account naturally, because other than that, how could they possibly send email to you from you that they don't have access to the account for? So enough said in this respect. There are very, very resourceful persons out there who actually have the ways and means to do certain things that we may not understand, and we may be misled into thinking that they have a whole lot more information about us than they do. This brings me to a slightly different point, and that would be, how do we know that the information that people provide to us is actually information about us? And a lot of the times, the challenge is, did I ever put my information out there? And when I put my information out there, who would have gotten it? Who would have shared it? Who would have captured it? And who's now using it against me? One of the best things you can do if something like that happens to you at your workplace is call the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Smart Technology and to report your incident. Or you can report it through the channels of your department, whichever makes you most comfortable, or whatever the protocol your department supports is. However, do not, the first thing we ask you not to do is to panic and to start to provide any form of information to anybody, any outsider that you do not know about, or anybody who you cannot validate should have the information, because they may be giving you the impression that they have this information, and they may have some elements of it that they may have picked up, maybe public information that they have pieced together from various interactions. But the minute that they have got you giving them either clarification or validation of what they have, they can then expand that attack. So we ask that you not do that. Now, I'm going to pop into farming. And that's an online scam where a fraudster or malicious actor installs some code on a personal computer or laptop, and that redirects clicks or makes a website available that you did not necessarily want to
Recording
dissect
it
with it.
again.
Okay. Some of us may have seen that some time ago, or we may have experienced it, where we click on something and we think we're going to a particular site and we end up going to somewhere else, and we telling ourselves, well, I thought I clicked on a site that was supposed to bring me to Amazon, or that was supposed to bring me to Cave Shepherd. Or why am I at this site? I can't figure out why am I at this site that's asking me for some email details, or is asking me to put in some information to enter a code for online, some online, raffle or what have you. Generally speaking, that is a farming threat. We have not seen a significant rise in the number of threats like that, or we have not heard about them in government in recent times. They were a little older. What we've been able to do actually is put a lot more controls on the email system and the type of email that gets in to users like yourself, so that we protect you as much as we possibly can from threats like these. No, we're not perfect, and there are always going to be some person, some bad actor who's going to get past all the controls we have, and you're still going to see something pop up in your mailbox. However, if you see something in your mailbox, you're not sure about it, don't click it. Don't click it. Don't click it. That is the best advice we can give you. Don't click it if you're not sure about it. Spoofing. That is the whole concept of forgery of emails or email headers, so that it looks like it's coming from a valid source, but it is actually coming from an invalid source. Don't click it. Please don't click it. If you don't know what to do with it, you're not sure who you can call, you're saying, I sent email to somebody yesterday. I'm not sure if there's a response to me. You know what? I don't really want to tell anybody mess with this, Fine. Just delete it. But do not click it. Clicking it can open you up to a whole new set of threats, because what it does is the minute you click it, that link has embedded in it some code that gets written to your computer's operating system, and then your computer starts communicating outside of the network to other question number networks in all parts of the world. That sometimes we wonder, why is somebody in government trying to connect to someplace in Turkestan or Turkmenistan? That doesn't look like any kind of valid communication at all. So that is the result of clicking it. Please do not click it. Finally, password theft and public Wi-Fi network hacks. Let me say this about passwords. I believe most people are a little more conscious about their password. One of the things we recommend you do is if you are about to log into your computer and somebody's around you, especially if you work in an area where the public has to interact with you, and people may be closer to you in your space than in most cases that, or in cases where people don't interact with the public, please do not input your password where somebody can see what that password is. And if you do input the password and you suspect that somebody may have seen, just go ahead and change your password. Whether that's the password for your computer itself or the password for your email, those will be two critical passwords that many of you will use, will have. Please make sure that those passwords are always secure. We recommend changing your passwords 3 to 4 times a year. Yes, it's a bit of an annoyance. Yes, it is a little tedious. But if you are concerned that, the information that you're responsible for can potentially get out or somebody can get access to it, it may not be a bad thing to do. Password theft is not very common in government, and I'll say it's not common because we tend to share our passwords. Somebody's coming to work behind me, they need access to certain things, I give the password. Usually it said, it's the government's password, not really my password, it's the government's work, it's their information, so not a big deal. It is a bit of a big deal. Everybody should use their own password. And the reason for that is if something goes wrong, then there's a way to track back. There's a way to do a login report to see what went wrong and where it went wrong. So the person working behind you may have made a mistake, but because they're using your password, it looks like your mistake because it was your login and it was you electronically who would have done what the computer thinks you would have done. So let's try to avoid that by being a little more careful with the passwords we use and who shares our passwords and changing our passwords kind of often. So don't share your passwords. Make sure your passwords are at least, changed 4 times a year, and never let people see the password that you're using. Public Wi-Fi hacks. These are on the rise. The best advice MIST can give you related to public Wi-Fi hacks is do not use your device, your phone, your tablet, your computer, in public spaces where the Wi-Fi is not known to you. So let me be a little more clear about that. If, for example, you went into a Starbucks, I'm told that we've got a Starbucks here, and I know that Starbucks is pretty good about giving patrons Wi-Fi. Starbucks will tell you what their Wi-Fi name is, and they will give you a password for it, or they will have something called a captive portal that includes you putting a little bit of information about yourself, and then you're granted access. Those are places that Wi-Fi is secure and is managed. However, if you go places where there's free Wi-Fi, you don't know much about this Wi-Fi. It just says free Wi-Fi. It is very likely, it is very possible that the person or persons or entities running this free Wi-Fi may be trying to collect information about yourselves, your devices, and for those of you who are a little more technical, you will know what I'm speaking about. It is very possible that I go ahead, I connect my Wi-Fi device to this public network that says Lionsgate, for argument's sake. The people who run Lionsgate can tell that I am running an iOS device. They can tell it's running iOS 12.0. So they know it's an Apple iPhone 11, 12, 13, one of those. And they probably actually have the means of telling the type of hardware it is. And while they may not be able to see all the information coming from my phone, they can capture the encrypted information. And if they have sufficient time and computational power, they can try to decode some of that information to see where it was going. In other cases, it is even a little more nefarious where people can get into your device because some of us keep a very weak password on our device, or we think that that little pattern is actually the great protector of our device. But behind that pattern, you would remember that if you forget the pattern, you also have an option to put in the password. So it's the pattern on the password. And that password is something that's very easily hackable by people who have the requisite knowledge and equipment to do it. And it doesn't take a whole lot of knowledge or equipment these days. You can go off something into the dark web and buy a whole lot of that information or a lot of that software for cheap almost. And then you can go out and start your own little public campaign, like capturing people's information, trying to capture their passwords or what they're doing online, like online banking, that kind of stuff. Public Wi-Fi networks, please, please be very careful with them. You will then sometimes go from that public Wi-Fi network to your office network with the same device, and there is the distinct possibility that that device may try to one, attack other devices in the network if the requisite software is on it, or it may act as its own little personal little Wi-Fi network, starting to beacon information out there, asking people to connect to it because somebody has some measure of control over it. And while I'm at that, let me say that in recent times, one of the popular things we have seen in government is people listening to music using their own devices, and they plug these little Bluetooth headphones in, and they go about their business, doing their work, listening to music. When you're done, because we don't tell you can or you can't, when you're done, please turn the Bluetooth on your phone off. The Bluetooth is one of the fastest, easiest ways of getting access to your phone and one of the most insecure methods of connecting your phone to anything. The passwords for Bluetooth are generally 1234 or 0000, but somebody who has access to your phone, they're sitting within 30 feet of you, probably just sitting in the cubicle next to you. You may not know, can actually scan your phone, connect to your Bluetooth, and start to transfer information or steal information from you. So while it is very convenient to have some music probably to listen to in the privacy of your ears, that little Bluetooth connection is actually a significant risk to you. And you may not want to continue to do that while at work or in public spaces. Finally, USB drives. We are all almost guilty of this. Taking a USB drive from work, going home, taking some work home, working on it, bring it back to work, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I remember distinctly when I was first at the data processing, it happened probably within 3 years of being there. We were finding that every day we had no less than 20 or 30 viruses on the network. And these viruses were the semi-destructive type. They would just stop people's computers from working, destroy files, that kind of stuff. And we had tracked it down to the use of USB drives. What we had to do at that point is prevent people from being able to use USB drives that they brought from home at work, or if they were assigned USB drives by the office, then those drives would only work in the office because we had special software that prevented them from being used back and forth. Well, that was a little bit overkill. It was necessary time. I think today we can actually get around that by just being a little more responsible. So if you've got to work from home, which many of us do, we've now been given laptops that we can take back and forth. The challenge is when we go home, you're connecting to the home network and there are any number of things happening in the home network. What our recommendation is use of strong endpoint security software to prevent the whole concept of using a USB drive back and forth between home and work and transferring potential threats between the two environments from happening. We will get to that shortly. Human error is the biggest threat, and I don't want to elaborate too much on human error. It is something that we cannot really control. It is something that humans have to be mindful of, and they've got to decide, I need to be a little more careful about some of the things I do. So going back to USB drives, I need to take home some work, but let me think. Don't let me put that work on my personal USB drive. I can go to my accounts department, to whomever, and let them assign me a USB drive. So human error, we cannot really get around very easily. We just try to help people to understand the potential threats that are out there and how these things tend to magnify and multiply across networks and cause additional problems. But it's only through a program of consistent training and seminars like these that people will start to get a little more acclimatized to what can happen and how the human element tends to make most of the things that happen. Because just about all the threats we spoke about as briefly as we did, have a significant human error component in them. The computer, yes, delivers the information to you, but you've got to click it. Without you clicking it, it can't automatically happen. So that human error component is the one that we have to try through seminars and other ways of making people aware of the issues to reduce that potential component. So with that said, what are some of the measures that we can take to stay safe online? And this is where it gets interesting, a little more interesting, because now we're going to talk about some of the things that can be done that you can do that are inexpensive, in some cases that are free, that will allow you to be a lot more safe online and to have less risk of running into some of the problems that we spoke about earlier. And we came up with a number of points. There are about 12 points that I will briefly touch on them and tell you about them and how they help you to stay safe online. So the installation of antivirus software is one of our basic, most simple recommendations to all our users in government. And while we provide you with a computer to work from home that already has antivirus on it, people who have computers home that their children use, that their family shares, you should put some simple antivirus on it too, to at least get some basic protection. However, we also recommend to consider upgrading from antivirus to something called endpoint protection. And the difference between antivirus and endpoint protection is that endpoint protection gives you a little more functionality than antivirus. So antivirus will catch things like viruses and malware, and it will stop them dead in their tracks once it knows them. Endpoint protection will go a little further and stop programs that get on your computer from being able to steal information off your computer and send it to those nefarious parts of the world or sites in the world where people are sitting down just collecting this information about you. And we're going to give you some information about some endpoint protection a little later. We also recommend to keep your operating system patched and updated. For those of you who use any version of Windows, whether it's Windows 7, which probably is a little old now, but you may be happy with it still, or Windows 8, Windows 10, some of you may have even gone to Windows 11. I will say that in the newer versions of Windows 10 and 11, you don't really have much of an option. Your computer, once online, will go and download these updates. It will ask you at various intervals when to install, and if you continue to stall the computer, like people like me do that, you will find that one morning you get up and found the computer has rebooted because it has actually gone ahead and installed the updates at the point where it has determined it needs to happen. For people who use Windows 7 and Windows 8, it is not that automated. You have to go ahead and download and install the updates. So keeping the operating system updated is one of the things that helps to keep you safe. The use of a personal firewall is another recommendation. And that personal firewall, in some cases, is included in endpoint protection. In terms of people who use Windows 7, 8, and 10, it is built into Windows. People who use Windows 11 have a little more functionality. And for those of you who may be a little more, let's say, security conscious, you may have a little router at home that has a little firewall in it. That is also very useful because it stops some of the most some of the most popular attacks from happening. Another option is encrypting your hard drive. And when we get to that, I will elaborate on it a little more, but that's probably one of your strongest defenses, because what cryptoware and ransomware, some of the other programs do, is actually encrypt your drive and then ask you to pay them to give you back the key or to get back your data. If your drive is already encrypted, it cannot be encrypted twice. Generally speaking, it's not very easy to do. So an attacker who comes up on a computer that already has an encrypted drive will more likely than not pick up their briefcase and go out to another computer, because this one is not worth my time. There is an element in most computers nowadays called the TPM, the Trusted Platform Module. And what the TPM does is it's responsible for keeping things like cryptographic primitives and some other little fancy programs in place to help you protect your machine. One of its major functions is to encrypt the drive. and we're going to talk about TPM a little later, but TPM is available in just about every laptop that has been made since 2013. There's a TPM chip that's included in it, and it's just a matter of going ahead and activating it. So don't worry about it too much. If your computer is a government-owned computer, you can go and ask your IT folk to be able to activate your TPM module for you, and they should be able to take you through some of the steps in getting TPM up and going. For others who may want to experiment a little bit by themselves, there are a number of YouTube resources that are available on how to go ahead and activate your TPM module. We spoke of this a minute ago, avoiding questionable or suspicious wireless networks, but we did not speak of keeping your smartphone secure, other than me saying you should not leave your Bluetooth on. However, your smartphone is essentially a mobile computer, so you should consider putting some form of antivirus or endpoint protection on it too, as well as keeping it updated, because that is the little computer that you hold in your hand that you might not think much of, but it is actually a computer and it behaves much in the same way. Consider using a password manager for all sensitive sites you visit, including social media sites. And what that password manager will do is keep all your passwords for your social media sites in a secure location under one strong password. So when you install that password manager, the only thing you've got to remember is that one strong password for the password manager, and that allows you then to have a vault of passwords ready to be able to use on your social media sites. We are not necessarily promoting social media, but we know people are going to use it. We know that some departments who actually have social media presences for their interaction with the public, and people are responsible for maintaining those social media presences. So we're not going to shy away from it and say not to use it. We are just giving you good advice on how to keep your social media presence secure from a cybersecurity perspective. Protecting your email is one of the final things you will speak about. And finally, there is a site that government has that many of you probably don't know about. We recommend going to this site, and it has some very useful resources on protecting smartphones, laptops, working from home, how to help your kids. That site is https://www.getsafeonline.bb. And we're going to promote that site a little more at the end of this presentation. That is www.getsafeonline.bb. That is an excellent resource of things to do and not to do in the online world. So, jumping into it in a little more detail, the installation of antivirus software, and I will include at this point something called anti-malware. There's a program that has been quite popular. I am not necessarily giving it a plug here, but that program is called Malwarebytes. Many people from probably 2014 and onwards were using Malwarebytes to do things like scan their machines for malware. So if you're going to install a simple antivirus program, for example, McAfee, many of you know that. Some of you may know AVG. I think some of your government actually have heard of AVG. There's Avira, there's Kaspersky, there's F-Secure, Microsoft has their own. Now we're using ESET across government. These antivirus programs are good, but if you're installing antivirus only, you should also install an anti-malware program to complement that antivirus program. Keeping your operating system up to date, we just spoke of. However, if you take a look at this graphic, we're talking about Windows, Apple, Android, and Linux. So whichever one you're using, always be mindful, you should always have the updates for that program by just going to the update section of the program, pressing the update button, and letting the program go and search for the updates it needs. It is generally very automatic, means that you don't have to choose the updates. The updates are generally chosen for you based on what the operating system deems itself to need. And at the end of the download of the updates, you will go ahead and apply your updates. Now, antivirus. We just spoke about this, we're back here. And I just wanted to come to this point really quickly so that people could see the value here, and that we've included for you 10 free or very close to free antivirus programs that you can use if you don't have an antivirus installed on your computers already. The question here is, which antivirus do you use? We've got a number of antivirus programs listed here. There's Avast, there's Avira, McAfee, Norton, ESET, and there even may be others. So very quickly, a poll should pop up on your screen, which is asking you, which of these antivirus programs do you use? You've got a single choice.
I see some answers coming in, Andre.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. We see the end result so far. We're seeing majority of the persons have indicated McAfee.
Which I am not surprised about.
Right.
Yes,
But they're
very,
still
very
going.
rapid.
We're still going.
I'm almost willing to put a bet that McAfee will be the hands-down winner in this case.
Okay. So they're still coming in. It's looking quite like McAfee.
I'm going to submit something other than McAfee just for the just to be different.
Okay. All right. So I am going to share the results of the poll with you. Let me see, and still have some activity. Okay, we're ending the poll now. So I'm sharing the results.
Ooh, 41%. Yes.
Yes. So we have some persons there. Well, as ESET, yes, that's the next one.
Yeah, it's the next closest.
Yes, that's because of the government employees
Because,
as well.
yeah.
Right, and we have persons saying other choice. Maybe you can find out from them.
What the other choices?
Yeah, so Colleagues, you can share that in the chat, what the other antivirus protection that you use.
Okay.
So I'll stop sharing the results now. So those persons who said other choice, you can type that one in the chat box. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you. Let me very quickly go through some of the options here that we are recommending that you can employ. Many of you said you use McAfee. That has been very popular for a number of years. There's some other options here, and I'll just go through them very quickly. There's Webroot, there's Kaspersky, Endpoint Security, there's Sophos Intercept X, Next Generation Endpoint, Panda Adaptive Defense 360, CrowdStrike Falcon, Endpoint Protection, Viper for Business, Avast, and Sentinel-1.
Okay, Andre?
Yes.
So I see some persons here in the chat. One person says they use Malwarebytes, another Windows Defender, another AVG, Microsoft Windows Defender. I figure that's the same one. Panda Adaptive Defense. Somebody asked if Windows Defender is an adequate protection. So you think so? Those are the ones that were put forward by those persons that said other.
Okay. Let me address that question really quickly. Is Windows Protection adequate? Windows Protection is built into the Microsoft operating system since Windows 7, if I'm not mistaken. Adequate is always a very interesting word. It keeps updating itself. If you keep it updated by using the update feature of the Windows platform, it would do an adequate job. Yes. Will it do a splendid job? Probably not. But we're not necessarily trying to figure out which one is the absolute best. What we're trying to do is just have a baseline so you're protected against the most common threats. If you're some person who doesn't do a significantly large number of things online, you don't do internet banking, you don't do research, you don't do 10, 12 different things online, or on the same computer for that matter, then the Windows platform and its requisite protection mechanism is going to work for you. However, can you layer something else on top of that? The answer is generally yes. So Windows protection will play pretty decently with some other antivirus programs like the ones you've mentioned here. We have found that Norton and McAfee are the two exceptions in this case that they generally don't like to work with other endpoint protection or antivirus suites. So some things to install McAfee or Norton, you may have to remove or disable the onboard Windows suite if you're using a Windows computer. So getting some protection is critical. Don't worry too much about which one it is, as long as it gives you some basic forms of protection and it doesn't allow people to get into your computer very easily or to steal your information by providing you with links that are nefarious. You are pretty well protected. For the person who said that they use malware bytes, let me address that very quickly. Malware bytes is not necessarily antivirus, it's an anti-malware. And the difference with it is tuned specifically for looking for malware and not necessarily looking for viruses or Trojans. Our recommendation to you is take a look at these top 10 free endpoint protection suites. Go do a little bit of research, read up on it, see which one seems to best suit your needs and your pocket in the event it is not entirely free for a year, and go ahead and install it. If I were to make a recommendation here, it would be the Sophos Intercept X next generation endpoint, because it is very light on the operating system and the CPU. It doesn't take a whole lot to run, and it is cross-platform compatible. So you can run it on a tablet, Android, you can run it on a phone. I think it even runs on iOS-based phones. So things like your iPhone will actually support it. It's one I tend to like myself, but you have to be comfortable with the decision you want to make. So take a look at these 10 free endpoint protection suites. Go ahead, do a little research and pick the one you want, install it, off you go. Just have some basic protection for your devices. Sorry, let me, righty, sorry about that. In maintaining the secure system, we talked about the use of personal firewalls. And if you install an endpoint protection suite, it will generally come with a personal firewall. If you have a Windows machine, it already has a personal firewall, so you are quite well protected in that respect. If you are using broadband and at home you've got some form of a firewall that sits behind the little device that Flo or Digital has installed for you, you've got some additional protection in the way of a hardware firewall. It's not a bad idea to have multiple layers of protection, because anybody who's attempting to get into your system or who has gotten into your system based on the action that you took that you were unaware that allowed them into your system may still have some additional trouble getting through multiple layers of security. So that endpoint protection plus the built-in firewall in your operating system plus the hardware firewall sitting, in your house as a wireless device, what have you, will cause an attacker a little more grief than he or she may want. And the truth of the matter is, most attackers don't really want to get at us individuals. They tend to target governments and big corporations and stuff. Where the user comes into play is where that user has things like, some assets. You go and do online banking, that kind of stuff. You will attract a different type of attacker, not the major attackers with the major hardware and the major resources, but you still don't want to give anybody an easy time getting your information. So that personal firewall is critical to have. Encrypting your hard drive. I just spoke about this. There's a program called Veracrypt. I'm thinking Veracrypt that exists that allows you to do what is called system level encryption, or you can do file level encryption. In which case, if you have specific files that are very sensitive, you can go ahead and encrypt the folders of those files or encrypt the files themselves. Or you can go ahead and do full disk encryption, in which case you encrypt the entire hard disk. Now, it's going to make your computer run a little slower for those who have already slowly running computers. For those who have nice, fancy SSDs and the newest laptops, you won't see a bit of difference in that respect. But it is one of the best forms of defense, absolute best forms of defense that you can have against any attacker, because once that drive is already encrypted, they've got to turn and go away. Can't encrypt it again. They can't do anything like ransomware and that stuff. You have got the door locked. You've put in, I don't remember what that gate we put behind our doors now, the raw iron gates that go behind the doors. And then all the way into your bedroom, you've got the passageway locked and the bedroom door locked. You are not an attractive target at all. They're going to find somewhere else to go. So encrypting your hard drive is one of the absolute best things you can do to prevent just about every last one of those attacks that we spoke of earlier. Now, This can also be done from your TPM, your Trusted Platform Module. TPM does a little more than just encrypt your drive. TPM does things like very secure boot. So in the event that a program gets onto your computer and it changes some of the parameters of your computer that it shouldn't, TPM will prevent that program from running anymore, and it will boot you back into the last known good profile you had. It also does a number of other things like storing cryptographic keys and stuff and certificates for sites. I don't want to go into the mechanics of it. It's a real fancy piece of technology. However, I will say this: if you've got a laptop and it's 2 years old, 3 years old, 4 years old, even 6 years old, it has a TPM module in it. You can go ahead and do some research on how to enable that TPM module, and that will give you the ability then to go ahead and encrypt that drive and provide certain levels of security that will make your computer once again unattractive to persons who may have gotten in via some sort of email or message or some link that you clicked on. Turn on TPM, shut them out. End of story. They're done. They're done. Sever that communication. It is a wonderful piece of technology. However, it's not well known. Many people don't seem to know about it. Whenever I talk about it, people are like, I never heard of that before. And are you sure? Yep, it's there. I use it. I can tell you for a fact, it is one of the best kept secrets around. Don't ask me why we don't use it in government. I can't answer that. We have different layers of security, and for some reason, TPM is just not one that we ever seem to use. For people who have desktop machines now, like some of you who would have gone ahead and bought a Dell some years ago, or an HP, or even a Lenovo, the TPM chip is not normally, unless it's a newer desktop, integrated onto the motherboard. It is actually this little module that you're seeing here on the left-hand side under the word Trusted Computing Group. That little module plugs into your motherboard and provides all the same TPM functionality, because the little chip on the module is the little magic chip, as it were. So for those of you who have desktops, you may have to go and buy a TPM module, but if you've got a laptop, it's already included and it's ready to go. Just enable it and off you go. We spoke of avoiding questionable networks. I will go a little deeper, just a little deeper into that, and say to you that in Barbados, we do not yet have any overt knowledge of people who intentionally set up these questionable networks for stealing information. I'm not saying it hasn't been done. There are some people who will do things in their home networks that if you connect to their home networks and they will leave it open for you, they will, teach you a lesson, coming trying to steal their Wi-Fi. But in general, people who set up networks specifically for the purpose of stealing information, we do not have any information that we can clearly say we know of people who do it. That is not to say that there aren't people who probably do it, who are probably getting away with it now very quietly, but any questionable network that you are unaware of the owner of the network, whether it's a little store down the road, what have you, and it's not some valid entity that you can say, well, this is a Starbucks, this is a Chefette, this is a KFC, there's some measure of trust in this, we recommend you stay away from it. Maintaining secure smartphones, I spoke a little bit about that. Your smartphone, as I said, is a computer in itself, and it has all the elements of a computer, probably with the exception of a hardware keyboard and some other things, but it is a computer, so it does need to be updated. Please consider, when you go through that list, let me run back to that list of the 10 endpoint protection suites, and you're doing your research, look for one that also has the ability to be installed on smartphones. So that way you can have a single suite that you can use between your desktop or your laptop, your tablet, and your smartphone.
Okay,
That
excuse
would
me.
be, yes.
Excuse me, Andre, could you
Go ahead.
go back a bit to
Certainly.
the endpoint? We had a gentleman, Mr. Rollins, was saying the endpoint, the 10
Yeah.
free, right? He
Mhm.
was saying that he could only see about 8 of the 10.
I'm not
I
certain
heard.
if that is a function of his screen resolution. Is anybody else
Okay.
having that challenge? I can
What?
see all 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Oh,
Nah, he's probably right. I'm seeing it. He did say,
I can only
okay,
see 4, and I
Only
have mine.
okay,
four.
that may be a function of the slide share. Everybody's using different resolutions in terms of their laptops, their tablets, what have you. This information can be provided for you in the link after the seminar. We can send you that information on those endpoint protection suites in 2021.
Okay, thank you, Andre.
You're welcome. Password managers. These 4 password managers are, this is not a plug for any of the 4 of them. I will say personally, if you ask me, RoboForm is one of the ones that I would recommend. However, I am not giving any additional points to one or the other. These are just samples of password managers that are either very inexpensive or free. And what they do, as I said, they keep your passwords in a very secure environment on your computer, on your tablet, on your smartphone, and they allow you to then store the passwords for things like your email, your social media sites, and even if you want your banking sites. I personally just like to keep my banking password in my head. When I'm forced to change it, I just change it, and I keep repeating it to myself for half of a day so it sticks. And I just personally like to do that. But RoboForm is not one that loses things. I may be just a little anal on that, but RoboForm, NordPass, Keeper, and McAfee, all 4 are very well respected password managers, and we recommend that you keep that password manager on your device so that you can have access to the passwords that you use daily or in general in your work and your daily life. No, staying safe at work and on social media. We know you're going to use social media. We know. We don't necessarily block it. In some cases, we disallow it in some sensitive areas, but we don't block it because it does have a value. What we ask users to do is the following so that they can also be safe. Create a unique password for each social media platform. Here we've represented the 6 more popular platforms: Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, and TikTok. TikTok being the most recent. Be selective about who you accept with your friends or your followers on your social media platforms. Naturally, if you are a government employee, that is even going to be a little more critical, because what we found, going back to the attack we spoke about, where the person from Pakistan was calling, that person actually, as they got more and more information, started to go to LinkedIn and Facebook and do research on persons in the department. So they were able to draw some connections, see who was connected to who, what type of jobs they did, how important those jobs were, was the significance, how close they may be in terms of getting them to the prime minister, the influences they had. You've got to be very careful about who you accept in your social media group, especially when you work in sensitive areas in government, or you have access to sensitive information. Do not click on links that appear to be unusual or suspicious. We talked about that from email. We talked about that from just web surfing. It doesn't change on social media. Looks unusual, looks suspicious, skip over it, get off the page, keep moving. And do not post any sensitive information. My LinkedIn profile still has information about me on the profile that is not exactly what I do. So I'm here presenting on cybersecurity. Clearly, I have some responsibility for it in government, although I'm not saying depth of it, but you're not going to see that on my LinkedIn page, because I tend to keep that information away from just about, everybody else. The reason for that, as I said, when you're working in government, it is sometimes very easy for people to target you and try to draw you into certain things that you may not realize what you're getting into until it's too late. So keep your personal information off LinkedIn as much as you can, off TikTok, off Instagram, if it relates to you and the sensitivity of any work you do for government. Protecting your email accounts. Don't share your email password. You see suspicious stuff starting to show up in your email, call me if you think you brought it on yourself. Talk to your supervisor, somebody you can trust, and say, look, I need this information to be kicked up the ladder because I don't like what I'm seeing here. I may need some additional help. We try to protect users as much as we can. We employ quite a bit of technology in the email system, which we don't talk about, but there are lots of checks and balances and scans and scrubs and all these kind of things that the mail goes through before it gets to you. What we don't do is we do not read your mail emphatically. So if you have something in there that you're concerned about, we don't know. We just don't read your mail. I don't know that there's necessarily a crime against it specifically from the Computer Crimes Act. It may be, but we don't read your mail. I want to make users very, very, very comfortable about that. We don't read your mail, but we do have automated systems that scan the mail looking for questionable behaviors, questionable, how should I term it? There are things like Bayesian filters, and they start looking for certain patterns and stuff. So if people start to try to do nefarious stuff, we hope that it will pick it up. So we try to protect you as much as we are able to, but you've also got to protect yourself by not sharing your email information, unnecessarily. Don't go posting it all over the social media. And I want those people in government who do have some measure of sensitive roles, or they have access to sensitive information, to pay a little more attention to this. Finally, back to that site, getsafeonline.bb. Please visit that site. It has a treasure trove of information that is very, very, very useful. Parents, teenagers, children, guardians, people who don't know much about computers, who just want to know what else can I do, or what can I do, or you know what, I think the neighbor next door might be able to see what I do on my computer. Go to getsafeonline.bb. And there is a treasure trove of information on getsafeonline.bb related to what you can, can't, should, shouldn't, will be able to, won't be able to do to make yourself safer online. Finally, what happens if you run into a threat? Something happens and you don't know the turn. There are two places. There's the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Smart Technology, which is generally your first option if you are working in government. And then there's the RBPF that handles some cybercrime incidents outside of that. So, for example, things that go down to social media posts that may be, not so nice, you may report them to the Royal Barbados Police Force. However, anything within government that government has purview over comes to the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Smart Technology, initially for them to be able to guide you, get the information on it, do the requisite research, do the requisite checks and balances, tell you what your next steps are. And that will be an ideal resource in helping you to stay safe and get safe online. With that, I'm going to thank you for participating. I've said so much in that space of time. Hopefully I haven't overwhelmed you, but I gave you enough information to know what some of the threats are and a whole lot more information on how to protect yourself. So I'd like to open the floor for questions and answers at this point in time. And you may submit your questions to our moderator, Ms. Jeanette King.
Thank you, Andre. We have a few questions here and comments, and we also have a request. So the first question, how do you stop other sites from sending your information that you did not actually request that information from?
That's an excellent question. The answer to that is I really don't know. Most of the times, sites share information because it's in the disclaimer. When you accept that cookie, when you go on that site, you accept by default by being there, the information you generate or you give them, they can share. So generally speaking, there is no single way to say site A, please do not share any information with site B. However, responsible sites, if they're asking for certain types of information from you, like let's say you were signing up for a webinar and it was asking for your name, address, country, this, that kind of stuff, there's generally an opt-out button that allows you to say to the site owner, please do not share my information with other sites or with other entities. Keep my information private to this site and this event. Your best option when you're online is to be careful where you're going, because once you release that information to cyberspace, you do not seem to have a significant amount of control of how that information is used and can be used. Now, with that said, there are some proposals for doing things like digital rights management, extending that down to the individual level where an individual could determine how their information can and can't be used, but that has not happened yet. And I'll tell you why. Put simply, it is money. If I've got 30,000 unique visitors to my site and I can sell that information to another site so they can mine it for, let's say, people who are interested in both things that I sell and things that they sell, that's revenue for me, that's revenue for them. And we don't have any laws in Barbados that protect us against that. The European Union does have some legislation that protects some of its citizens at some level, but it's almost a free for all. So it's really up to you to be very circumspect and careful about where you put your information online, because once out there, it generally can't be pulled back, or you can't reverse the process. Next question. Do we have another question coming, Jeanette?
I am so sorry, Andre. I've been
Okay, that's
talking,
fine.
but I've been muted. I'm
That's
so
fine.
sorry. I'm so sorry, colleagues. The question posed is how do you encrypt the hard drive?
All right, so there are two ways to do that from our presentation. Let me just go back a little bit so I can take you back to that particular slide on encrypting drives. The trusted platform module is one way to do an encryption of your drive. If you've got a laptop, as I said, that is 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, some things up to 6 years old, that facility is already built into the motherboard of your hard drive. All you've got to do is, if you don't know, go back to YouTube University and type in TPM, Trusted Platform Module, and the type of laptop you have. So it might be a TPM with a Lenovo or a TPM with an HP or what have you. And you're going to more likely than not find a video that takes you through a step-by-step of it. You can also, do that search online and get a list of instructions. The second way to encrypt your hard drive is a program called Veracrypt, Veracrypt. Veracrypt. I think it may actually be in a new version. I don't remember the exact version of that now, but Veracrypt is a program you can download that allows you to do the same thing. You can either do full disk encryption or file level, folder level encryption, in which case you could just encrypt certain files, folders, or the entire disk. So those two options are the options to use, Veracrypt or TPM. Now, those are ones I can pull off the top of my head. I'm certain that there are other programs that will do it, that may be commercially available. They may cost a little more. The options I'm giving you are either free or very inexpensive in this case. So those are the ways you can go about doing it. TPM and or Veracrypt.
We have very little limited time left, but Andre, we can take a few more questions. Is that
Certainly.
okay?
Certainly.
Okay. So we have here, what security system is recommended for cell phones? And this is, I think this is in addition to a question that R. Jordan had asked, wanting a quick review, I suppose, of the information you would have shared regarding leaving the Bluetooth on.
Right. So I did mention earlier on that I like Sophos Intercept X. Only because it is very, very clean, it is very simple, it's intuitive, it doesn't take a whole lot of resources. It's one of the ones that I would say I highly recommend on cell phones. There's another option in the MDM arena, the mobile device management arena, that is a little more costly. It's probably a little too costly for the individual. But with those endpoint protection suites that I mentioned, I think there are at least 2 or 3 of those suites in addition to Sophos that have the ability to do protection down to the level of a mobile device, whether it's a cell phone or a tablet. So in doing that research, you may come across something else that you may like, but I can say off the top, Sophos does have a very excellent suite of applications that Sophos could install on your cell phone that keeps your cell phone well protected. I actually used to use it on a previous cell phone I had. And I remember somebody once introduced me to a program that allowed you to do something like caller ID, caller ID name and number and some background stuff. It plugged into a database. Anyway, so I went to try to install this thing and it immediately blocked it and said, this is a known hacking tool that allows people to steal your information from your phone. So while that app was masquerading as a really nice piece of software, allow you to do caller ID name and number, Sophos picked it up and said, no, this is not what it appears to be. So it said that to say I got really in tune with Sophos at that point, and I found it to be a great piece of software. I am not harvesting. It's the only one you can use, but do check it out if you've got the time. Download it. I think there is a 30-day trial for the base plus some additional features. The actual base may be free. If I remember correctly, it may be free. So that's a viable alternative. Outside of the additional things I said to do. So keep your Bluetooth off, keep the phone updated, use some strong passwords on it. Those are always very good, but that additional piece of software will add another layer of security to your security posture. Next question.
Okay, thank you, Andre. Well, we are up now to past 12. But as I promised colleagues before, those questions that we were unable to answer within this time, we will be recording them and we will pass them on to Andre, who will respond to them as promised within a week of the webinar. So I just want to thank you. So don't be disappointed that we didn't get the opportunity to answer your questions here. I suspected, I knew a flood of questions would be coming because this is a very, very interesting and the information, is very, very necessary, very important. So we will end your questions, the questions and answer segment right now. And what I would like you to do is to go through the chat for the feedback questionnaire, which my producer will place in the chat for you. And please do remember to complete that feedback form. Your information, your feedback is very important to us as it helps us at the Learning and Development Directorate to improve those productions that we deliver to you every time. Thank you, colleagues. So as you complete the feedback form, I wish to take this opportunity to thank Mr. Andre Walk for that very informative presentation. I am certain that many of us are now very much clearer on what cybersecurity is all about. We have an understanding of those terms like farming and fishing and whaling, for example, and how we can remain less susceptible to these threats or attacks while online, and who we should contact in the event of a cybercrime threat or attack. I also extend sincerest thanks to you, Andre, on behalf of the Director General, Ministry of the Public Service, the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Innovation, Science and Smart Technology, and the Director of the Ministry of the Public Services Learning and Development Directorate for taking this time from your very busy schedule to share your expertise and enlighten us with this very important information on cybersecurity. And also to you, colleagues, for attending and participating in this webinar. Thank you for your questions, your comments, and your queries. Also, thanks to our producer, Michael and Sherwin Alice, who assisted in the background with the compiling and the recording of your information and assisting with any technical issues. Colleagues, once again, thank you for joining us. And I wish you all many blessings as we celebrate our country, Barbados' 54 years of nationhood. Do have a wonderful remainder of the day and an enjoyable celebration. Before we go, we'll actually leave the chat open for you to complete your feedback forms. Remember, this information is very vital to us, and it is very vital to you as well, as it helps us to enhance our productions and our products to you every time. So thank you again, everyone, and goodbye for now.
Thank you for being here, participants. It was good speaking to you.